You are listening to the Techie Leadership Show with Bogdan and Andrei.
Hello and welcome to the Techie Leadership Show. Today with me I have Belle Walker. She is an organizational efficiency engineer, taking organizations from friction to function. Belle is also the founder and lead consultant of Bellevue Consulting, where she uses system thinking to ensure alignment across strategy and execution. With engineering degrees from Harvard and USC and experience ranging from project management at Google to engineering director at Here Technologies, she brings a wealth of technical and operational knowledge to clients across industries. Hello, Belle, and welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited about our discussion today.
Yeah, I'm also really excited. I'm really looking for, from a systems thinking perspective, what is the viewpoint on leadership and how it works. But before we get into that, do you want to add anything else about yourself?
I think the overview you provided is a great summary. I think the only thing I would add is to give a little bit of context on how I went from engineering degrees into business consulting world, and it's because I see a ton of overlap between the way that engineers approach problem solving and the way that leaders, managers, and others can better support their teams. And so my favorite example I like to use is that with a mechanical engineering background, I don't know any mechanical or civil engineers who would design a bridge, draw up a bunch of blueprints, and hand them over saying, make it out of steel and you'll be fine. Right? Steel is a meaningless term. There's a million different types and finishes and bits and pieces, and yet steel is something that we kind of think of as being relatively consistent with subtle differences. And we constantly draw organizational charts on paper and design these complex structures and hand them over and say, make it out of people and you'll be fine. When you put it in that context, you realize it's kind of crazy, right? Of course, you can't just completely abstractly design a structure for people and expect that the people will slot in perfectly when you wouldn't do that with something like steel. And so that, for me, was a very crystallizing moment where I realized that there really was something we could bring from engineering into organizations and leadership perspectives.
That is true. And especially a little more detail never hurts, especially if you're in the implementation phase. If you're just in the brainstorming phase, okay, you don't have to be that detailed.
Right.
But when you say go do this, this should be really, really concrete.
Exactly. Yeah, and there's a lot of history with scientific management of being this notion that people are interchangeable cogs in a machine, but cogs aren't interchangeable, right? Like if you have a machine made out of cogs, there are differences across them. You would never make a machine out of the same type of cog. It's nonsense. And so the idea that nonsense principle would then apply for people is silly, but actual engineers who were designing a machine out of cogs would go into great detail about the strengths, weaknesses, characteristics they need. And we should always be doing the same thing when we're thinking about people, really understanding them, their individual motivations and aspirations, and building that into our human machinery.
Exactly. And this reminds me, I don't know if you have the same saying, but here in Romania, especially in the tech field, it's a lot like having the silicon lock, which when you buy technology, when you buy CPUs, sometimes you buy a cheaper one, but it actually performs in the higher bracket. And it depends, because when they manufacture the CPUs, they all have imperfections, and they try to test them. And they say if they have this many imperfections, they're A grade. If they have this many, they're B grade. And so it goes. But sometimes you have so it's not uniform, and even two CPUs from the same batch that are A grade, they're not going to run the same. So even if you want to make it the same, with all the work and everything, and you have a lot of wastage in the industry due to this. And it's all about having luck. And with people also, sometimes you have a star performer. he does great job, and then he has to leave, or you start like a disagreement with him, which is not a great idea, and then he leaves, and you find out it's really hard to get somebody else to replace him.
Yeah, exactly. It's and there's risks around building a structure around one star performer.
Yes.
And so it's something you always have to bear in mind. Sometimes it's a risk worth taking, but you need to understand the potential consequences of those decisions.
And like Silicon luck, you also have to have people luck. If you're a little lucky, it's okay. It's better.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Belle, let's start with the question. What is the biggest leadership success story you witnessed personally?
This was a really good question, and I'll be honest, I've spent a lot of time thinking about it, and I've been a bit depressed to realize it's difficult for me to think of strong examples. I felt like I had a plethora of options to choose from when I was thinking about failures, but successes are so difficult to pin down. And I'm going to skip ahead a little bit and talk about my leadership philosophy here, because I think that that's fundamental to my answer to this question.
Okay. So what is your leadership philosophy?
So my leadership philosophy, the sort of driving principle is that a strong leader is best represented by a successful team, because a team's successes are the team successes, right? There's almost nothing I've ever seen that a leader can do to guarantee a team's success. What they can do is enable, empower, uplift, but they cannot single-handedly drag a team into success. On the other hand, there are a million ways that a leader can single-handedly prevent success. And so I then feel like a team's failure is the leader's failure, right? The leader, their job is to troubleshoot and enable and unblock and basically prevent failure. But it's the team, the team has to bring to the table and build themselves up to that successful point. And so when I think about true leadership success stories, what I look for is successful organizations and successful teams where you haven't really heard about the leader, right? For me, that's pure leadership success, is the team is not only successful, but is recognized and rewarded for that success that they have brought to the table. And then at the same time, I consider it true leadership success when there is a failure and the leader takes accountability and responsibility. And so I would like to use as my example of a biggest leadership success an occasion when I saw a team, I'm going to do this very generically because I've seen it several times, but a team failed to hit their deadlines, failed to hit their goals, and the leader of the team stood up and said, "That's on me," right? I am accountable. I am responsible for this team. And so this is not the team's failure. This is my responsibility. And they, recognize that their role, and so whether or not they achieve the goals, I consider it a leadership success to take on that ownership in those scenarios.
Yeah, as a leader, the buck stops at you, and you.
Right.
And this is the hard part, that everybody thinks like, when you think like, I want to go into management, it's going to be so awesome. Said if everything goes right, I can take all the praises. If everything goes wrong, I can dump it on other people, and it's the other way around if you want to be a good leader. So it doesn't work out like the main perception is. And the sad thing is, it happens a lot. That's why we have this perception like, oh, management, when there are problems is because of us, when it's good is because of them. So you have all this constant, this friction between execution and management, because people that accede to management have like a bad perception of how to be a leader.
Yeah. Well, and I think that there is a very selfish reason as well to take that accountability and that ownership, because if you don't, how can you learn? Right? Those moments, those failures, when you say, this is on me, this is my responsibility, then the next step is to say, so what happened and what can I do differently next time? And then you do it differently next time. And I feel it's like in sort of broader tech Silicon Valley, we talk about the value of failure and how important it is to have had failures and to have had opportunities to learn so that you can bring those to the table, how it increases your chances of long-term success. The exact same thing is true in a leadership context, right? You're going to be a more successful leader if you know what you've done wrong in the past and can avoid those mistakes than if you've always been successful and have no idea why. And you're just setting yourself up for a fall in the future.
From my own experience, it makes sense. It's logical. It's easy to see the value in failure. Experiencing it is really hard.
Yes, absolutely. There is nothing about failure that feels fun.
It's not fun at all. So you don't want to get too much value that way, if
Right,
at all possible. Right. At least from one point of view. But it's good that you still get to learn from it. So if you succeed, usually you learn more from failures than you learn from success. After like a big success, you think back, how can I recreate this moving forward? And you think you can, but usually reality shows you that you cannot do it. You didn't learn that much from success.
Exactly.
And since we're talking about failures, what is the biggest leadership failure you had the unfortunate experience of witnessing?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, I thought about this quite a bit too, because I feel like leadership failures are common. And what I ended up deciding is that I've seen entire leadership chains where the leaders failed to be advocates for the teams for which they were responsible. And so this is a case where I'm talking about leaders who are also managers. So I also have a leadership philosophy that leaders and managers are like rectangles and squares. Not all leaders need to be managers, but all managers do need to be leaders. And so specifically, I'm thinking about leaders who are also managers. I think that they have an additional level of accountability to the people that they lead because it's a formal leadership. And so I've seen cases where managers are not advocating for their teams. And so they tell their stakeholders always yes, no matter what the ask is, no matter what the capabilities of the team are. And then they turn to their team and say, you must do this. So basically the anti-agile approach.
Yes,
and
that is.
And I'm drawing a distinction here between leaders who have misestimated the capability of the team and leaders who completely refuse to advocate. Because one is, I think, a mistake that you can learn from and iterate and is a natural part of building and maturing a team. The other, when you refuse to advocate at all, you just say yes, 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 you're not helping your team, you're not helping yourself. No one is winning in that scenario. And I have seen from the CEO on down in an organization where the CEO to customers will never say no.
Yeah, I've seen it also, and it hurts.
Yeah, and so for me, I consider that to be sort of the biggest leadership fail I've personally witnessed, is when no one in an organization is willing to say no, because that's a crucial part of supporting and enabling and empowering a team. Even, you have to say yes sometimes, but you also have to say no sometimes.
Yeah, Bell. And the lack of pushback, it's something that is becoming more and more pervasive, as I see, like in the industry, like with clients and then inside the company. So everybody says yes, 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 and they take on stuff that maybe they can do it, or maybe they shouldn't do it, but because they said yes, they have no other options. And from my point of view, my advice is like, if you're a team lead manager and you represent your small corner of the of the company, and during a big meeting you get something to get done, always push back, even if you know it's like they estimate it's 5 days of work and you know your team could do it in one day. Still push back on it. Be known as the guy that pushes back, and it's better to give like longer finishing terms and finishing the project faster. Everybody's going to be happy in that situation. But if you give like you set goals that you never reach, everybody's going to be not that happy with the performance of yourself and the team.
Yeah, and there's some nuances there around the idea of blue sky thinking and setting seemingly impossible goals and finding ways to achieve them. But you need to, if you're going to play the game where you set an impossible goal, you have to be aware of what the constraints on your team are going to be. Because when you say, and there's plenty of examples of this and lots of books written about teams that achieved the impossible. And one of the most constant themes is that they were given the freedom and the flexibility to think outside and act outside their existing box in seeking to achieve those goals. And so it's not enough to say, I want you to do the impossible. You have to say, I want you to do the impossible, and I'm going to give you the freedom to do so. And realistically, that's not an option in many, many cases. More often, there are very real constraints that are imposed by the organization, by the resources available. And so you have to temper the goals and the expectations that you're setting with the flexibility and and capabilities of the team that you're working with.
Yeah, and you open like this idea of blue sky and impossible goals. It's nice to be able to achieve it. One thing that, from my personal experience, is cannot set like timelines for it. It's impossible. That's why it's an impossible goal. If somebody's going to crack it, it might take a week, it might take a year, it might never get done. But you cannot say like, by this date is going to be cracked and you guys have to have the solution. And you have to do it just as you said. You cannot expect doing the same type of work to generate the solution to an impossible problem. You need to let people to think. Some of them think better when they're walking, some of them might have to go to the library. Everybody has different styles. For example, I just like to meditate on stuff, read a lot of books, and then spend time doing something else, meditating, listening to music. It looks like I'm doing nothing, and from a manager's point of view, it's awful. It is absolutely awful. Like, I'm paying this guy and he isn't doing nothing, but I'm working on solving the tough problem, and it takes time, and it has to filter for your brain and get all the information, put it together, and once you have it, implementing it, it's really fast. But getting to the concept, super hard.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, it's something that good leaders understand. Unfortunately, I didn't have the opportunity to work with leaders that understand the whole process. That if you want innovation and you want new stuff, you have to wait and have people that look like they're doing nothing around the office or at home, wherever they are, and having like meetings where the information is still processing. uh, and and it goes. But well, moving on, for aspiring leaders, what would be the top 3 leadership tips you would have for them?
Yeah, so I think the top leadership tip that I have, number one, is to give as much credit and recognition as you can, and not to say good job, right? Good job does not convey a clear sense of accomplishment. You need to be very specific and say, you did excellent work on this project and achieved this result. Or, you found this huge issue and it's going to set back the overall project timeline, but we know that now, as opposed to delivering to a customer with a huge problem, right? Finding ways
Yes.
to recognize the good work that your team is doing on a regular basis is incredibly motivating for them. Finding ways to emphasize the value of the work they're doing, even when, like in the case of an extended timeline, the result may feel negative. That's the most important time to be recognizing
Yes.
what you appreciate out of the situation. And it's going to make you look better, right? If your team is constantly being recognized and rewarded for the great work they're doing, people are going to notice that your teams constantly do good work, constantly have things to be recognized, and that will reflect well on you. So it's really a win-win. You're going to encourage and motivate and inspire your team to keep working hard because they know they'll be recognized and rewarded. And it's going to be good for your career too. So give as much recognition
Yeah.
as you possibly can on an ongoing basis is my top recommendation. My second is to remember that enabling is a key aspect of successful team leadership. So coming back to the leaders versus managers again, when you're responsible for a team, this gets into that wonderful world of micromanagement, right? And people are terrified of micromanagement, as they should be. Micromanagement is effectively never the right approach. But I often see leaders who are so afraid of micromanagement that they offer no support to their teams and no guidance. And the complete and total absence does work for some people, but not the majority of people, right? Most people need some degree of support. And the example I like to use there is going to a restaurant, right? If you go to a restaurant and there's no menu and you're expected to order something that the kitchen can make with the ingredients they have in the style the chef knows to get what you want, that is not only a recipe for disaster, but it's very overwhelming and stressful for the person who's going to order, for most people. A menu does not completely restrict what's going on. I mean, you went to a restaurant knowing that they had a menu, so you knew there were going to be some restrictions. You often know roughly what the cuisine is, roughly, and that menu is an incredibly enabling form of structure and constraint. And managers need to find that balance for their teams as well, right? It's not that you come in and say, the waiter does not come up to you and say, here is what you're going to order, setting aside fixed price, very specific circumstances. But again, we've opted into that. Most of the time, the waiter says, here are your choices. And those choices are freeing and empowering because that limitation is a helpful, valuable one. And so I would bring that into management as well. Micromanagement, not helpful, but a complete and total lack of structure can also be very difficult for your team. Yes. And my third is, you asked about aspiring leaders, and I would ask, why are you aspiring? Right? There's no reason anyone cannot become a leader, right? You don't have to be a manager to be a leader. You can start setting good examples, inspiring and motivating your colleagues. You can find gaps in the organization. Maybe there's no technical forum for a programming language that you're an expert in, and you could start a monthly meeting where people can exchange ideas. Or maybe there's a million opportunities and examples where you can find ways to start building team building exercises for the organization, right? there's very few reasons I've ever seen for someone who wants to be a leader why they can't start right away. So that's my third tip, is if you describe yourself as an aspiring leader, ask yourself, why are you aspiring and not leading
Yeah.
already?
Stop aspiring and find there's also an opportunity to take leadership role. Like the examples, you don't have to be like anointed a manager to also become a leader. You can
Right.
start all kinds of circles and discussions and inside an organization. And the really interesting thing is that you're going to get promoted to a manager position because of the actions you take. Because people see like he has leadership qualities, he has a drive, he is doing stuff to improve the quality of the workplace. He's not confined just, or she is not confined just for at what has to do like on a daily basis for the job. He has or she has real interests, and they want to, and they're taking action on it, and that's something that gets noticed and you get promoted. Now, Belle, what I would be interested is if do you have like some formula or some ways to when it comes to giving credit and offering recognition, do you have like a process to do it?
Yeah, I do. I think there's some great formulas out there in terms of how to structure recognition. So making sure that you include who they are, what they did that inspired you, that you're recognizing as specific as possible, and what the positive impact of that work was. So in terms of a very basic who, what, why in formulating that praise and recognition. And then in terms of how often you deliver it, if praise is not something that comes naturally to you, I recommend starting slow and with accountability. So find a partner, a buddy, and commit to them that you will offer some praise that's in the structured format once a week, right? Pick a day and say Tuesdays are going to be praise days. And then you sit down and on Tuesday, you make sure that you've come up with something. And what you'll find over time is that it'll be a Thursday and you realize this is praise you want to give. And then on Friday, there's other praise that you want to give. And why store it up? Why wait till Tuesday?
Yes.
Offer the praise as you see it, right? And what may start as an exercise where you have to really sit and think about your week to find things to praise. If you make that a routine and a habit, you'll start seeing opportunities elsewhere, and that gives you a way to build up.
Yeah. One thing that I could add like to this is also look at the people that you have in your team. Some of them might like public praises, some might like private praises, some more, some less. So try to tailor make, not just spray the praises equally, because some people, for example, me, if I would get like praised each week, after 2 or 3 weeks, I would say something is wrong here. Like what's with all this praise? Okay, I understand that I'm doing good work, but it feels something is off. So people can get spooked by too many praises sometimes.
Well, I think that comes back to the structural piece, right? And I think there is something around the notion of praise in public, support in private. If you only praise and you never offer that framework and that guidance and that structural support to your team, then when it comes time for promotions and recognition, if someone has only heard praise and they don't get a promotion, they don't get the highest possible bonus multiplier.
Yes.
Right, you have to explain to them now what's that discrepancy, and you have not been supporting them because they have not been given the tools they need to truly excel and exceed. And so I would sort of modify and note that part of supporting your team is being very clear with them what are the opportunities they have for improvement. And that might be because they're underperforming, right? It's easy to think of ways to give people guidance when they're underperforming, but even people who are meeting your expectations or even exceeding them, if they're exceeding your expectations, but they're not on track for the highest possible recognition and reward you could give, you still need to be explaining to them what they could be doing to get there, right? It's an ongoing conversation, and I think that's such a crucial thing. I'm glad you brought it up, right? Being clear that praise is important and motivates, but you also have to provide the framework and the structure for people to understand how to continue going above and beyond if they want to.
And exactly as you say, it's an ongoing conversation, and that's your job as a leader and also as a manager. From my point of view, you talk constantly with your team and help them succeed, become better, and protect them, shield them from other departments, other bosses that are more higher up, or from the problems. Take all the blame, fall on the sword if it's necessary. But the ongoing conversation, it's what you do as a leader. You're not in production anymore. It's talking and talking. From my point of view, it's like a melting pot of psychology, human sciences, and taking all the information that you had, like when you were doing the stuff, so you can help them or guide them to become better. You're more of a coach than a manager, actually.
Yeah, the coaching piece is a huge aspect of it. Yeah. That you can manage the projects and you can manage the work of the team, right? But the individuals need to be coached, supported, inspired, enabled.
Exactly. And that's why, from my point of view, many people that were great performers, they get promoted, and then you have like the classic, every person gets promoted to one step above their talent base. Now, Belle, I'm really interested in what is the book that had the most profound impact on you?
Yeah, I don't know that there's a particular book that had the most profound impact on me, but there was a moment that I often come back to when I was fairly young. We were my family. I have a lot of family in New Zealand, and so we had gone to visit family down there, and we were watching a bunch of penguins at this penguin colony. And there was a road that went through the colony that they used for maintenance and support. And so it wasn't very trafficked, but the penguins understood that there was something different about the road. And the road was between the penguins and the water. And it was lunchtime. They were hungry. They wanted to get into the ocean. And so they all clustered at one side of the road. And then individual penguins would like slowly start going farther into the road and then get scared and come back. And then go slowly and get scared and come back. And then finally one penguin ran all the way across the road. But it didn't immediately change everything. It wasn't until like 2 or 3 penguins had made it all the way across the road that suddenly the wave of penguins went running across the road. And it was just this unbelievable dynamic of watching as the entire sort of flock of them fed off of each other, and it took a whole bunch of different penguins making more and more progress before anyone fully succeeded, and then it took a couple of them fully succeeding for everyone to get across. And it was I see that all the time in people, right? You see those moments where sometimes leadership and setting a good example just means getting a little farther than anyone else, and that's okay. And then the next person can build on what you did and can build on what you did, and eventually you'll all get there. So I'll use that moment instead of a book.
It's a great moment. And penguins in New Zealand.
Yeah, penguins are fabulous.
And it's true. You have like this movement. You see like people testing a little, and some of their friends see that them testing and they have a little success, and they say, yeah, if they can do it, I know them for so long time, I can also do it. And inching away, and in a way it's important like what friends you have. Now also, like this week I found out, which is really funny because you're talking about penguins, I found out that penguins sometimes are known to sometimes push another penguin in the water to see if it's safe or not.
Maybe that's one element of the penguin behavior we will not emulate as good leaders.
Yes, don't do that. Don't do
that.
But it happens. Sometimes you see it like in bad leadership or no leadership situations. Like you jump in and tell me how it is.
Yeah.
Belle, if people want to find out more about you, where should they go?
For people who want to learn more about me, I recommend going to my Bellevue Consulting website. So it's bellevueconsulting.com, BELLEVIEW consulting.com, and the link should be in the show notes.
Yeah, I'll put it in the show notes for sure.
Awesome. And there's, in particular, right now, I'm offering a workshop around leadership and culture in the sort of mid-pandemic world. We've had a chance to learn a lot about what remote work and entirely remote work for companies that already had some remote work has brought to our culture and our dynamic. And I think there's an opportunity right now to take time to see what elements of the last couple months have been positive, and we want to make sure we carry forward. And so I think doing that now rather than waiting until there's another large sweeping change is really valuable. So for anyone who's interested in that, there's also some details about those workshops on the website.
For sure. And I highly recommend people to go check out the website, especially having this information. I think is crucial. And it's the way we work is going to be changed after all this pandemic, and it's at least from the reports that I'm getting, it's not over. It's just slowly going away. So it will take some time until we're out of it, and our work relationships are going to be different. And it's good to be informed and do some workshops. And Belle has the information, so check them out.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It has been a delight.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
That was today's episode. Tune in daily. Rate, like, subscribe, and share, please. Oh, you can find further info and materials in the show notes on techyleadership.com, including links to the guest book recommendations.